So as I was talking about a little bit just a minute ago, we're kind of asking the room a little bit of what kind of demographics you're in. Are you developers? Are you business, content editors, things of that nature? We're going to talk a lot about today about the user experience in general. We usually are thinking about that, especially from a developer mindset, of the user experience of the front-end user experience. What are our end users that are accessing our site seeing of that side of it? But today we want to shift that a little bit and talk about the shift to considering editorial UX as well, and what are our content editors seeing? What kind of UX are they looking along the way? So before we get started, a little bit about myself. I'm Kevin Bassarab. I'm the Director of Development at MediaCurrent. I've been there for about 5 years now. And my background comes from the media industry and actually starting as a content editor. So I started my career as a content editor, moved myself into the developer landscape over time. And from there, I really had that passion to make sure that we build that good editorial experience for our users. I did do work for Jamaica Gleaner, yeah. Yeah. Oh, did you? Oh, awesome. Yeah. Let's catch up afterwards. We still do work with them today, actually, too. Yeah. This is Mike. Go ahead.
And I am Mike Priscilla. I am the engineering manager at Group 9 Media. I've been working with Drupal for 5 years now. We started off working on the redesign for MarthaStewart.com, and while there, I really worked on building communication with the editors and making sure that their experience was ideal for them. So you probably know who Martha Stewart is, but what the hell is Group 9 Media? We are a partnership of 4 mission-driven brands. We have Thrillist, Now This, The Dodo, and Seeker. So if you haven't heard our name, you've probably seen our content on the web somewhere.
Cute puppies,
cute puppies, politics, all that fun stuff. Great Twitter follow. We are one of the world's largest digital-first media companies. We have over 4 billion video views per month. We average about 30 million views per video. And we have offices in New York City, LA, and San Fran. And we're always looking for more developers, so if you're interested, let's talk afterwards.
Awesome. And then MediaCurrent, I've heard of a little bit of. We're a team of about over 70 people and Drupal experts now, founded by 2 lifelong partners and friends for years, Dave and Paul, back in 2007. And we're here to actually, what we do is actually partner with you and your organizations to help build powerful, impactful websites that are achieving the strategic results that you're looking for along the way. So we span a range of different clients, anywhere from media enterprises, like you saw before on the bio slide, to large enterprises, high-profile global brands, nonprofits, universities, spanning the globe around there. Looking outside of that, what about today? We've talked a little about ourselves, what we're looking at. Here's a real quick brief look at what we're going to talk about today. But what you're probably really wondering about right now as we jump into this and not agenda side is, what's this about? What's this shift you're actually talking about? What's this editorial UX side that you're looking at? So let's think about that for a second. What is this shift? The shift is from a website being cohesive, all-in-one, monolithic beast that you're looking at in time, to now something that's iterating over time. The front end is really there. It's changing quicker. What we're seeing there is building, our CMSs are getting a lot bigger, but our front ends are getting leaner and updating more often over time. So what we see with that is the design, marketing, and editorial teams are becoming a little more fragmented over time. So design and marketing are updating sites earlier and often and changing those front end of the experiences, making sure we're updating that a little more frequently. Instead of doing full redesigns and rebrands all at once, we're changing smaller parts out individually along the way. But when we do that, we're keeping the front end of the website up to date, but we're not actually updating the CMS along the way with that. We might be adding bits and pieces in and hodgepodging things together along the way, but our CMS is still the same. We're not rebuilding that from the ground up each time some change happens on the front end. So when we're doing this, we're really making a good user experience for our end users, but we're leaving our content editors behind, and we're leaving them in the dust a bit and not really thinking about what they're looking at day to day. So the content editor experience is getting left in the dust then at that point. But it can be argued especially that your actual content editors, especially on some of the different high-profile media sites, actually spend more time on your site than your actual end users do. So if editorial users are spending all this time on your site, editors are actually creating the content you're delivering, it could be stated at that point that editors are really the voice of your company at that point. So we're in an age now where that editor user experience is becoming a much more valued proposition that we need to account for along the way. Your editors should definitely enjoy working in your CMS as much as they enjoy doing the content and working and making the individual content for your users. But before we think about more on that editorial side of things, what about different CMSs that your editors might have had experiences in, or things that we compete against as Drupal, since we're here all primarily working with Drupal day to day? So there's a variety of different competition we tend to talk about. When we talk Drupal specifically, especially from an agency space or things of that nature, when we're talking to clients, there's usually 3 names that come up when we talk about Drupal. That's going to be Sitecore, Adobe AEM, as well as WordPress. Comes up a little less often, but still is there a lot of times. People rave about the editorial experiences within these. Bill Shelley just had a session yesterday kind of comparing especially Sitecore and AEM to Drupal and talking about how some of their editorial experiences are better. But we always can think that whatever CMS we're using, no matter what it is, something else that we're not using is going to be better. And we think about that in everything in life pretty much. Whatever we don't have is what we want. So why do we have that come up? These aren't the only CMSs that we compete against. As we continue to build along that, there's new things coming up too. So things like the Contentful, API first Contentful CMS is coming out. That's really developer first, doing an API first, make that front ends easier, but they're also including better media management, they're better user experiences, and they're able to focus more of their time and energy on the authoring since they don't have to worry about a front end in the end, on the end of that. So that's a newer system coming out. What if we think even further outside the box from there? So we think about these as our standard competition that we're working at and talking about with editor experiences. But what about where our editors are actually in day to day, even before they come to our company, or what they're doing even as the industry evolves over time? Things like Medium, BuzzFeed, things of those natures are something that are really putting their time and energy into editorial experiences, and our content editors are expecting that experience when they come to our enterprise level CMSs as well. So in the end, everyone has that CMS of choice, but nobody likes their CMS. We all have kind of seen this a little bit before. What's up with Drupal? Like, we'll think about that for ourselves. Why is Drupal so complicated? Why do I need to do this? What's going on here? Let's take a step through and look at why is that? What is wrong with each of our CMSs that we don't like whatever we have in front of us at the time? Why is this such a normal paradigm to look at? And why are we accepting this is really the question to think about there. So when you think about your CMSs, your Drupal instances, shout out some things that kind of what do you not like about your CMS right now in Drupal? Image uploading? Media? Anything else? Publication workflows, it's a good one, definitely. All those really go together into things you don't like. Other things to think about is like too many fields. It might be too convoluted to find those fields. Maybe there's too many required fields. Maybe there's too many workflow restrictions. Maybe I don't know where my content's actually flowing. Nobody really is seeing that. So we can solve this pretty easily, right? So one of the things we think about there is WYSIWYG. That's always been the default. Oh, let's just throw it in a big WYSIWYG editor. That solves all of our problems. Everyone knows this. Editors know what Word is. It works just like Word, right? It's going to work out perfectly. In the end, we know that that doesn't really work out. Images don't really align right. There's not quite the right things. Dragging things gets really weird. Those are kind of normal things we think about that goes wrong with WYSIWYG. But what about where the web is going in general? And what about the web from that point forward? So WYSIWYG is great for individual small pieces of content, bolding, italics, linking, things of that nature. But when we start expanding out from the website and thinking bigger than just the website, we need to remember things like decoupled interfaces, non-web services, apps, voice commands, digital signage. All those different things are coming, and your website in 2 years might not really exist in the way you think about it right now as we look forward. So our content and our content management needs to evolve to go with that. WYSIWYG doesn't adapt to that side of things. So we want to keep that concept of create once, publish anywhere in line as we think about this, and try and always remember to keep the display logic out of your data. Make sure that we separate our data and our display logic so that we can continue to build and evolve and keep that CMS for the long-term future. So we know a little bit about what that shift is, what's happening, why do we want to look at that, and we want to think about the editor, but why does this matter? What do we care? What's going on from that perspective?
So, excuse me, been a little sick, so please bear with me. It can be tough to see why this matters. We're developers, they're editors. Why do we have to worry about the experience that they have on our site? So we don't see what they do, and editors don't see what we do as developers, but we're both in the same team. And if we both succeed, then we're going to push a company forward. We have to make sure that content creators can have the tools available to them to create content on as many platforms as possible. We have to make sure that we're focusing on the content, not the website. It's content management. Your CMS is the source of truth for all avenues of platforms. Media companies, they post to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Alexa, Google Home, what have you. And it's not just content creation, it's content management. We have to make sure that the searching functionality, updating functionality, it needs to be seamless enough that the editors can do this on a day-to-day basis and feel comfortable inside the tools. Efficiency in the tools equates to efficiency in content production, which equates to more reach, and if you're lucky, more money. If your users have trouble navigating the site, they're going to rely on external solutions. At Group 9, we actually, our editors, they use a very large Google spreadsheet in order to plan and schedule content. We could easily do that in the CMS, but they have decided that that is more efficient right now. So hopefully we can change that in the future. So one of the ways to do that is to keep the tools out of the way of the editor. So one thing here, you're going to see the JET tool referenced a lot in this presentation. JET is short for JSON Element Template, and it's basically a custom Drupal 6 implementation of paragraphs that we built on top of React about 18 months ago. So we learned at Group 9 that pre-JET, editors spent a lot of time creating articles, and developers spent a lot of time maintaining custom code. Now, post-JET, editors spent a lot less time on articles. It was a lot more easy to create content. However, developer time stayed the same, if not grew, because we were now maintaining even more custom code with more than one technology, React, Form API. And our time was also spent mostly on fixing bugs and maintaining. No new features were implemented after the initial launch of JET. So how do we keep tools out of the way of the editor? By simplifying editorial workflows. So at Group 9, we have freelancers in almost every major city in the United States and many international cities as well. The current workflow for freelancers involves sending a Microsoft Word document to a production assistant in New York City to input into the CMS. We don't let freelancers into our system because it's too convoluted, it's too complicated. And just to give you guys an idea of scale, this isn't just a group of 4. We have a team of almost 300 full-time content creators, not including all the freelancers globally. We publish over 100 pieces of content per day. We, as developers, are usually focused on shaving milliseconds off of load time for the end users. But what if we applied that concept to the editorial tools as well? At Group 9, each piece of content has on average 3 editors touching each content. If we can shave off just 1 minute off the time of creation of their article, that equates to about 5 man-hours. At Group 9, we've been able to shave off about 3 minutes so far with our new tools. Imagine the money that's being wasted by not allowing freelancers or outside parties to use your CMS. So, what does a friendly tool look like? Quick background information. Throws was founded on founded as an email newsletter, and email is still a very important part of our business. For about 10 years, we had a very complicated tool. Kevin saw it, and he still doesn't know how to describe it. About 18 months ago, I was tasked with building a new email tool, which is what you're seeing right now. The requirements were that we have inherited email layouts, the ability to send unique content to each of our 75 cities, which will be displayed off of the email recipient's preferences, and the ability to fall back on curated evergreen content if no local content exists. This is running on Drupal 6 using a custom React layer, 2 actually, there's 2 different React applications in here. And when this was launched, the experience gave the editors the ability to create custom emails faster than they ever could before. These editors weren't editors that we built in-house. We hired these from email-centric companies, and even then they said that this was the best tool that they have ever used for email creation. We send almost 5 million emails per day, and this was very influential in making sure that that was a seamless process. So do they really care about how the tools look? This is a side-by-side comparison of Drupal 6 on the left and Drupal 8 on the right. The custom React applications on the left, and we have been able to leverage paragraphs on the Drupal 8 side now. I'm not sure if anybody saw Toby's session yesterday about paragraphs in depth, but he discussed theming on the front end using custom templates per paragraph, and we're utilizing that concept on the right. We have paragraph themes that you would normally have on the front end, but we are displaying them on the back end as the default collapse state for the paragraphs. So why does this matter? Your CMS shouldn't be rebuilt every 2 years. Front-end technologies are moving very quickly among different platforms, which, as we discussed, shouldn't be the focus of your CMS. It seems like every week there's a new game-changing JS framework popping up. There's one right now. What can we do to build your CMS for the future?
So when we look at that and thinking about what we want to build and building a CMS for the future, we want to try and always leverage anytime we're building sites and look at contrib first as much as we can, and then layer on any custom code that might need to happen to get to the end goal. So with Group 9, we were able to take that Drupal 6 implementation, upgrade it to Drupal 8, and get rid of a lot of old custom code, which is actually pretty impressive of how much you could do in Drupal 6 when you actually start getting into hacking core and like putting React on top of it and the cool experiences you were able to create and what Mike's team was able to create there. But for us, the challenge is how do you then change that into Drupal 8 and start taking out a lot of that custom code, but still leaving that good editorial experience. So when we look at Drupal 8 in terms of that, and we go back to our little graphs here, we had our editorial experience, our editorial time and our developer time were way up pre-Jet system and the component-based system you saw in that GIF a little bit ago. Then we go into that Jet system with component-based React Drupal 6. Editorial time goes way down. Developers are still up though. We're still taking care of a lot of custom code, updating things, not really adding new features along the way. Drupal 8 comes along, and now we're able to drop not only the editorial time, but we're able to keep the developer time down as well, and we're able to now focus on building new features and building more functionality for editors rather than just maintaining the status quo. So by utilizing paragraphs as a baseline, that is really that component-based solution for any type of site now to go about. So for those of you that didn't see the session yesterday, what is paragraphs in general? Just to give a quick overview of that. And what you can relate paragraphs to is a component-driven layout system. So we're able to put some fields into these individual paragraphs, select those, put things together, and then build those on a page and make very dynamic, changing layouts without custom code, without the block system, without layout managers, all sorts of different things in there. We're able to do it right within the node level and give a lot of functionality to our editors at that point. But out of the box, it still has a couple things that are wrong with it. So what we were able to do and what we took from there is took the initial paragraphs interface and worked on the problem of how do you add paragraphs to a node. So by default on paragraphs, you're adding to the very bottom of the stack each time when you add a new paragraph on. Well, in Group 9's case, there were articles and nodes that had over 100 components added to them going through the day. And you're not going to want to take that component from the bottom, drag it all the way up to the top. We know how drag and drop works in the editor experience. That's not going to end very well for you. So allowing that experience out of the box was not going to work. So we were able to patch the paragraphs module and add in this functionality on top of what the community already started to add paragraphs in between existing paragraphs already on the system. This is available on D.O now for you to add to your sites as well, and the community is actually continuing to build upon this to get it into paragraphs core as well. But that wasn't our only problem. We also ran into the issue of, hey, we have 100 different components on this page. What do we want to do? We don't want to just save that individually and make sure we save progress along the way. So we also went through and contributed through a patching to do saving of the individual paragraphs in line. So as you're adding new paragraphs in, you don't have to save your entire node and go back. You're just saving your individual paragraph, and now you're able to keep working through without fear of something going away as you're adding more and more pieces to it. We're likely going to combine this together into one paragraphs field widget so that it's all available out of the box without finding a bunch of individual patches. But that's not out in the community yet. We can talk about that if anyone wants to help on that side of things. And then that in itself was only one part of it. If you're seeing in the GIF here, GIF, whatever you want to go with today, what's today's word of it? But we also have a pop-up showing up at the end here. This is coming with a little bit of the paragraphs modal functionality. It's happening within the paragraphs core module right now to patch. But that wasn't really quite good enough for us. We have around 35 different paragraph types right now of different components. These are all strictly content-based paragraphs, not layouts. So that big list of lots of things to choose from doesn't really scale that well. So we also went into the contrib side of things and found the paragraphs browser module, which lets you bring up a modal and actually sort all your individual paragraphs. You can filter these down, you can categorize them. So you can have media paragraphs, you can have text-based paragraphs, things of that nature. Really nice system. We actually, for the add inline in between, since the paragraphs module had a lot of stuff, we patched not only the paragraphs widget for that, we also patched paragraphs browser to allow that inline in between functionality in there too, since they were both using individual widgets at that point. So that's a way we were able to take that component base and make it better for the Group 9 team and really make it get to the point that you were seeing earlier in the GIF of the side-by-side where it actually looks very similar between the two. But what other contrib modules can we use on our sites to help build the editorial experience without doing a lot of individual custom code? That's an area we always want to think about. How do we keep adding things through, and what do we want to do as a baseline for any sites going forward? So one thing to think about there is auto-completing all the things. Making sure that we're giving editors good pieces of content and easy access to the content along the way. So things like the Autocomplete Deluxe module that upgraded to Drupal 8 as part of this project as well, gives you a nicer user experience for the inline autocomplete fields that come out of the box on Drupal 8. This allows, as you see here on the screenshot, what it kind of looks like. It's a way to really always use that as much as we can on our autocomplete forms. We also leverage things like inline entity form. Inline entity form takes that structure that we as developers like to make and that pretty structure of relational databases and relational entities and everything interacting nicely and keeps the editors on one page to fill out those pieces of content so they don't realize that they're going to 5 different places in the background. They're all in one spot to them. Things like the link it module lets you take a WYSIWYG editor that we talked about earlier, and when we want to link something into a WYSIWYG, you have to go out, find that URL. What's that URL look like? I have to go copy it and paste it and make sure I hit the right, is it Apple, Command, or Control? Which, am I on a Mac? Am I on Apple? Or am I on Windows? Where am I at? So it takes that out of the way and puts autocomplete for your content in terms of your WYSIWYG editor for creating links inline. But then when you take autocomplete, that's still searching for a title of some form. It doesn't really give you a lot of extra flexibility. So that's when something like any browser comes in. And any browser goes into a way where we can go more fine-grained control of individual fields and searchability for your entities across the system. What this really goes and helps out with, though, is when you think about media. You can now take that horrible media experience Drupal has out of the box for so many years and start building a much better and more beautiful experience from there by using things like Entity Browser to give you the filtering that you see at the top. As you go into edit each of these images, leveraging modules like the focal point module, this is letting you avoid that a bajillion different crops that your editors have to upload for all the different things your designers want to do on the front end of the site. We go in once, we set a crosshair on what the focal point of the image is, and cropping happens automatically, and you don't get that really awkward vertical crops that you get sometimes when you have images of people. Things like multi-upload through the Dropzone.js module is a way that you can look through and actually let your editors, when they're uploading slideshows or uploading galleries or individual images, upload bulks of those at a time instead of just one image at a time along the way. And then, if you really want to pull all this together, there's distributions out there to help with that along the way. So things like Aqua Lightning put all this together for you and give you that out of the box for you as a distribution, as a starting point as well. We also think through, outside of the media and autocomplete, to what about the general admin experience and the forms that our editors are seeing? So we don't want to forget about that in general at that point. We want to control our node forms with something like the field group module. This is allowing you to keep your field vomit under control along the way and ensure that we group all of our fields logically together. Collapse the things that you don't need at once, put things that if a certain editor only works on certain parts of the content, that's all they need to see. They don't need to see everything else that everyone else is looking at. So field group module helps you control that along the way. Override node options module is another great one to think about. A quick poll of the room. Does anyone actually use the sticky or publish to front page checkboxes you get out of the box on every Drupal instance? There's one or two, but, and there's a couple sites that have used the publish to front page especially on, but overall they're not used that often. Why do we keep those on our node forms for our editors to see and wonder, what does this mean? They hit that button. How many times do you have an editor come to you and say, I hit the button, it's not showing up on the home page? Well, I mean, why do we show that? Let's get rid of that. You can do that pretty easily through a form alter if you're already writing some form alters anyway. But if you want a contrib solution to that, there's the override node options module to help along the way. Again, taking that concept of not showing editors what they don't need to see Looking at things like the menu per role module. Make sure that your content creators only have the nodes or the individual menu options that they need to create their content and find their content. If you have an editor with more in-depth permissions, you can go and create content and menus for them specifically as well, outside of the generic Drupal permission system, because that can get a little bit wonky. You don't want to limit people either on what they can access. We want to guide them to what they want to see. Admin toolbar module, another great contrib one to, again, take clicks out of the editor experience. So instead of the big benefit that that one's getting you is instead of clicking 3 times to go through a 3-layer deep menu, it's giving you drop-down support. So you can hover over structured, go on to content types, go down to article, wherever you need to be, without having to make multiple clicks along the way. We do find in big editorial teams, such as Group 9, those content editors go around all this anyway, and they just start memorizing URLs and typing them in all the time. But they're always looking for that next easy step to get to. And then things such as your admin theme in general. There's not really that many out there that are really good, and add minimal theme is probably your only decent option when you want a minimal type of theme that you can extend and make a better experience from that side of things. And then remember dashboards for your users too. How many times we look in, our editor signs in, they get dropped on their user profile page, and they have no idea where they're supposed to go from there. Give them something that they can access and have a starting point from to get into their content for. So you can make these pretty easily through views and stuff custom as well. But again, if you want a good starting point, something like the total control module helps you out of the box get a couple of those set up and ready. And then adding on to that I don't list here because there isn't a Drupal 8 stable release for it. So if anyone wants to make that happen, we can talk about that. But the login destination module helps do that for you out of the box too. A lot of times we'll do that in custom code too, but that module is there to help with that side of it. So contrib gets you so far. As I mentioned, we do custom, but what kind of things do we want to do that isn't necessarily a piece of content that we want to do contrib out of the box? There's little custom considerations each site has that we want to think about as well along the way. So what do we not want to do? We don't want to make editors remember fallbacks. So fallbacks, what do I mean by that? Things like individual pre-save. So if we have a front page headline, we have a headline specifically for the front page, or we have a different image for a landing page, things of that we have logical defaults set up. Don't make editors remember what those are. Use custom code in a node pre-save or something to set that for you. If they didn't fill out the field, go ahead and set it for them. Now when the editor comes back in to edit, it's already set, they can change it. And then you're eliminating on the front end logic side of it any if statements or logic statements on that side. Instead of saying, if the short front page headline is there, use that, otherwise fall back to the title, and remember to do that on every single component you ever make. Instead, you just put it in the node, have it there, and on your front logic, you're just using the one field, and that's always there. Things like logical defaults for your user and the roles, and have defaults set up for them. So add some fields to your editor's user profiles. If they're a writer that's writing about cocktails for Supercall, or a writer that's talking about those super cute puppies for the dodo, set up their categorization and what role they're in on their profile, and set defaults for their taxonomy and things that they're going to use out of the box on the node form. So when they go to create an article, some of that stuff's already taken care of for them. They don't have to remember to hit that that they're going to hit every single time along the way. Don't make editors think of the content and how it's going to be displayed. Make them think about what the field is and giving the best content for that field on the editorial form. We want to think in terms of what the content is for that field and what we're actually going to show to the user at that point. We do want to eliminate also unnecessary actions for the editor. Why make them fill out a lot of required fields if we really don't need those as required fields? Make sure we're not getting in the way of them creating their content. We can give them guidance. We can give them maybe some warnings that just say, hey, you might want to do this. We see you save this. You might want to actually go back and fill out this because it's going to make your content look better. But don't limit them. Don't stop them because they're just going to get frustrated and go on and do something else and just send an email to someone else and have them do it for them. We want to make sure we eliminate extra clicks. When we were talking earlier about inline entity form, we have a nice, beautiful content architecture, all the nice things relationally set up. Editor doesn't need to know any about that. Make sure that they just see the node form that they need to get to, and they can add their content as they go along the way. Don't make them go to another page when they have content right there in front of them. And then, what about custom paragraphs along the way too? So things like the entity clone module is great for creating content type templates, where you can actually take a set of paragraphs. If we have things like a breaking news template, or a paragraph that's showing off a bunch of imagery through it, or things of that, an article type of that, let's set up a template for that, and let an editor clone off of that We could even write some custom code to make that even better. But let's clone off of that and give them a starting point. Don't make them have to remember, oh, I want this headline paragraph, then an image, then I want a quote, then I want this. Have that all set up for them if you're going to do that often. Have some defaults that they can build off of and have building blocks from to work from. Keeping your paragraph structures sane. Think about parameterized content versus freeform. Try and limit them, but allow them to do flexibility through it. That's one of the beauties of paragraphs. You have a little bit of limitation. It's very much a vertical-based system at that point, but you can move things around. They can do some things from it, but you're keeping them in parameters already, and they can't just do anything they ever want to. We talk a lot, this might be a little bit of a side thing, but like we talk a lot about layouts and panels and different ways of how do we create various layouts, and I want a 2-column or a 1-column. Do we ever actually do that as content editors on a day-to-day basis? Once we have our individual pieces, we kind of stay with that along the way. So let's give options for this and build on what we're doing day to day. Class variation through Classy Paragraphs module is a way to help build some of that in without the full flexibility of totally flexible layouts. You can take, if you're used to style guides such as KSS Style Guide or Pattern Lab or things like that, your front-end designers and people are used to doing where they can make a variation of a component. And basically when they do that, they just have one class modifier on the container. That class changes from it being left-aligned image to a right-aligned image or things like that. Using something like the Classy Paragraphs module puts that into the editor's hands of choosing that through a form and then passing that along. So you don't have to create 3 different paragraphs for just 3 different variations. You have one paragraph, choose your variation of it. And keep those variations sane. Make sure that you know what that is just by the text and what that paragraph is described as. If your editor's having to guess what that content's going to look like, they're just not going to use it. So that's a lot of living in the present and talking a lot about what we're doing currently. But what about if we take a little bit of a detour out to the future? Let's think a little bit more long term. What's going to change and what can we expect over the longer period of time? So things like preview and context versus in-context editing. Those are something we talk a lot about. We're hearing it a lot in Drupal 8. So inline editing is something you hear a lot about. I purposely do not want to talk about inline at all here. Because inline makes you assume that you're going to be working on a desktop or on a certain type of device. In context and caricaturing of that makes a lot more sense because where we're going isn't just on a website. We already know that users aren't really on their desktop anymore. Why are we trying to build in inline editing on that? Let's make something more in context that can scale out to lots of different systems that we don't even know about right now. So thinking about things like the caricaturing that we were talking about earlier on the Jet template, something that gives a good representation of what the content's going to look like, but it's not going to be a pixel-to-pixel match along the way. Ensuring to Ajaxify your content along the way. What we talked about earlier, don't show what you don't need. Keep that in line, using inline entity form, make that better, continue to build upon that, and even eliminate things of guiding a user through. So you can think about what a chatbot does. A chatbot doesn't give you 20 questions and you answer them all. It asks you 1 or 2 first, and then it guides the rest of the experience. Hey, I want to create an article right now. Do you want an image in this article? Do you want some text? What kind of things do you want? And then it builds you a form for that maybe in the future, what things you need to add into that, without you having to just see a massive fields and figure out what you want to add in. Keeping the editor on the page we talked a little bit about. And then decoupled editing is another one to think about. Right now we're talking a lot still on the admin experience of Drupal. What about editors when we talk about that in context? What about when we go to decoupled sides of things? How do we go ahead and leverage things like decoupled editing through systems like CardStack, Contenta, et cetera? So what about the editor actions in general, too? We know, as I mentioned, editors or our content users are already on mobile. They're already on devices. Mostly all of our sites are 80–90% of users are getting up to all mobile now. People aren't on the desktop anymore. Drupal at its core is actually admin theme is ready for mobile as well, but are our editorial experiences ready to be used on mobile as well? We want to make sure we look at improving tooling for mobile editing experience, such as lightweight editing, utilizing your phone's camera to upload media, what happens with autocomplete or drag and drop that we talked about on the phone. How do we consider those as we go to the future as well? Consumers are all mobile, editors are going to shift to mobile as well.
So this is a Google Analytics screenshot of all of our operating systems that editors have used to access CMS with. As you can see, there's about 50% of editors have access to the CMS through mobile, including one cowboy who decided that Nintendo Wii was a viable editing platform. Let's talk to him. So what about the future? Where is our content going to be going? Like I said, Group 9 is already posting to many different platforms. We have to think about Alexa, Google Home, VR, drones, smart fridges, dog collars for the dodo, Google Glass. Maybe not Google Glass. At Group 9, we are already creating content for most of these. We have Alexa, what are they called again?
Alexa Echoes?
Echoes,
Dots?
No, the
Looks?
We have Alexa apps. Google Home apps, we have Oculus. We've been trying to develop for all of these. It's not in the CMS yet, but hopefully in the future we can integrate those. So how do you do this? How do you go back to your office on Monday and start making a better experience for the editors? Well, first off, talk to your editors. They are the best resource for this. What we do at Group 9 is we have a weekly meeting between tech, PMs, and editors to try and figure out their wish list. And we pare it down, and on a weekly basis, bi-weekly actually, whenever we have a deploy, we make sure that we email them and let them know which of their requests made it into the deployment. That's a very good way to increase PR between teams. And we also make sure that each deploy keeps the status quo. You don't want to make the experience worse, so you want to make it at least as good as it is, if not better. So how do you propose this to your boss? Less time spent on development and editing, happier, more productive editors, more quality content, and more profit. And when you do these, you reduce the feedback loop and reduce frustration overall. Bring that back. Thanks, guys. Do you have any questions?
I appreciate it, yeah. So any questions from the room? We might have some t-shirts to give away, depending.
Yeah, I think we ran a little bit long, but.
You got there? We have a couple minutes to spare.
So do you recommend Acquia Lightning distribution if you want to get started with a lot of these modules?
Yeah, so the question was, do you recommend the Lightning distribution from Acquia to get started on this? It's a great starting point for sure. Especially on the media side, that gets a little complex to configure all the different modules, takes a little bit of time each time to do that. So what I always recommend is wherever you start at, whether it's a distribution or whether that's your own custom putting it together, build that into something you can reuse on multiple sites afterwards so that you're not having to rebuild that every single time. Because your media experience should pretty much be the same on every site. That doesn't really change much of how editors are wanting to use it. If you're making a really good kick-ass experience on one, why not give that to all the rest of your clients or different sites along the way?
One of the complaints I get pretty often from editors is that the editorial process is kind of linear in terms of creating content.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing like what it's going to look like on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had editors say that actually through Windows want to preview what the content actually looks like and then to go back to the editorial process to fine tune it. How do you propose a solution for that?
Yeah.
Are editors ask for too much to try and make the editorial process look like the front end and vice versa? How do you manage that?
Yeah. So to summarize, it was how do you make the editor experience look a little more like the front end? How do you worry about preview modes and make sure your editors want to see things exactly how they're going to look on the front end? Part of that is a mind shift change to talking to your editors to ensure that they're understanding that their content on that front end desktop that they're viewing in the office isn't what your users are going to see. They're on a bajillion different devices, all sorts of different things. Make sure they understand, especially, we talked a little bit, you're on the print background side of it. They're used to pixel perfect. What they see on the print side is going to be exactly what they see. Shifting them to, hey, your fonts are going to be a little bit different. We think about accessibility. Users are going to blow up their fonts. Your layouts aren't going to look the same. They're going to make things smaller, bigger. They're going to change what it looks like. They might even get rid of all your graphics. We don't know what they're going to do. We need to ensure we're delivering the best content and giving them caricatures along the way. So as we showed earlier a little bit, the caricaturing system, pull back to that one real quick. That was.
Yeah. So we support 5 brands, and each brand has its own unique branding, colors, images. So our compromise was to kind of caricature what the content's going to look like. So generally the same font, generally the same size, generally the same colors. But we have told our editors that's not going to be the exact pixel perfect match, and they're okay with it. They're okay with seeing kind of what it's going to look like, and then they can go to the preview page and make small tweaks if needed.
Great. for those two at least. Sure. Oh, terrible throw.
I have a question about, you said entity clone, but I started with templates. I tried to use node clone for something like that. Maybe that was a bad choice, but either way, when I made the clone and then started editing the clone itself and decided, okay, I don't like it, I deleted the clone.
Yeah.
The original was impacted. In fact,
Yep.
it lost all of its benefits. So
Yeah.
is entity clone better in that? I mean, does it actually do a deep copy of
So the question was, in the past, we're using especially node clone module, you might have seen where you clone something, and if you delete a paragraph from the clone module, it would delete it from the original as well. Entity clone module, from what I understand, has fixed that issue. I haven't used it most recently, but from what I've understood from other people who've used it, we do use entity clone on some production sites right now. But it's usually adding onto and creating new versions of like a home page or things like that, not necessarily starting from the baseline. It's a concept that I want to really explore on sites like G9 or other ones of how do we build more of that template and actually build that into a contrib module utilizing entity clone. Because to me, it's not good enough to just say, here's my template, let me clone it. I'd want to guide the editor to that and say, hey, create a new article and then have like screenshot like wireframe representations of what that looks like. Editor just clicks it and the cloning happens behind the scenes. They don't have to know what they're actually doing. They just want a breaking news template. So that's where we want to get to as we're thinking future of that. I have not seen the issue on the entity clone module so far myself, but I can check with some of the editors and see from there. But if it is still doing that, that seems like something we could take care of in contrib, pretty straightforward on the side of things. Awesome. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming through. Yeah. Drupal.